lucid statement. You have very comprehensively covered almost every area and subject of great interest to us, and gone into great depth and made observations with great clarity. And I think, at least I have not heard such a clear enunciation of policy and options available to us in a long time. I have also to thank you for agreeing to take a few questions, and in the interest of proper management of time, which is going to be very difficult, I would request friends to be to the point. And I know most of you, but it would help if you would please identify yourself before you ask the questions. And pointed questions will be most welcome, and comments, if any, might be as brief as possible. So may I request you, General Jacob, to go first?
Mr. Secretary, congratulate you for a most illuminating talk. First point I have, 60% of your warships are being moved into the Pacific. Is that enough? Warships can't operate on their own. Presume that you are moving ground forces, amphibious forces. We have not heard about that. Warships can't win wars alone. They need ground backing. Secondly is command and control. With the center of gravity moving to the Western Pacific, would Hawaii be a suitable place to command and control? In World War II, you remember, MacArthur operated from Australia. So the center of gravity is shifting to the western seaboard of the Pacific. I'm sure you have taken that into consideration. The other point is you need amphibious forces. No word on that. I see a Marine Corps general here. Presumably the Marines will be there. I worked with them in World War II, so they're great guys. Other thing is, better interaction is now required between the USA and India. There has not been enough of it. We should work closely together. We have common interests. I'm not going into too details. Other people want to speak. But I will just finish with a quotation from George Canning. You remember George Canning? The Monroe Doctrine? He said, I called a new world into existence to redress the balance of the old. Surely that is what is required now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions and for that last statement, which I think is very appropriate to the moment that we're in.
Monroe Doctrine was really George Canning.
I know. With regards to the rebalancing issue to the Pacific, we will, as we transition, as I stated the other day, we will move to a 60-40 balance in the Pacific, and listed the ships that would be involved in that transition. At the same time, we will not only maintain a significant ground force in the Pacific. We have a large number of forces in the Pacific at the present time. Most of them are located in Korea. We have a presence elsewhere. And our hope is to expand what we have termed a rotational presence throughout the Pacific. The Marines are locating in a rotational process in Australia. We've already located some there. That will continue to expand. We're exploring the rotational presence in the Philippines as well as elsewhere. In Okinawa, where we've just arrived at an agreement with the Japanese, we will continue to maintain a presence there, but we are moving those troops as well, these are Marines, to Guam, and we will establish a larger presence in Guam. So part and parcel of our focus on the Pacific will involve, obviously, the kind of forces that you identified to ensure that we have ground forces in place to be able to enhance that capability. With regards to command and control, our view is that the present PACOM, which operates out of Hawaii, provides the kind of joint force capability that is going to be very important for the Pacific. Admiral Sam Lockyer, who incidentally commanded the effort in Libya, which required a very significant coordination capability. A number of nations were involved in that effort. And he was remarkable at the way that coordinated effort became successful in returning Libya to the Libyan people. He brings that same capability to the Pacific. We believe in joint forces. We will have significant Air Force as well as Army, Marine Corps, and Navy presence in this region. But more importantly, he also believes very strongly in working with other countries to improve their capabilities. And that's one of the things that I want to point out to all of you, that we are not in the process of doing what we did in the Cold War, of establishing permanent bases from which we can project our power. Our approach here is to work with the countries in the region to develop their capabilities so that they can play a larger role in helping to secure and defend their countries in this region. We think that is a better way to promote peace and prosperity and security in the region. So I think the headquarters at PACOM is very efficient and effective at being able to take charge of this rebalancing effort. And again, with regards to amphibious forces, we do have a significant number of Marines in the region, and we will continue to maintain those.
Going back into World War II and earlier makes me recall that today is D-Day, the 6th of June. And as we discuss this, I think the Allied forces were in the process of establishing a foothold on the beaches of Normandy. So that's worth recalling their sacrifice and effort. Ajay Shukla.
Secretary Panetta, I'm Ajay Shukla. I cover strategic affairs for the Business Standard. It's one of our business news dailies in India. You would be aware that not everyone in India wholeheartedly supports the India-US developing relationship. And their hands get strengthened every time there's some apparent friction between two sides. Now, given that the United States has made arms and defense cooperation one of the tenets and one of the pillars of the relationship, it appears to be a bit surprising that on this ongoing FMS sale of Javelin missiles, the United States has cut down India's request to just half. Now, I don't want to get into individual arms sales, but this seems to be a contradiction of the United States statement that it wants to work with India. Could you tell us something about why this is done, especially given that the Javelin is essentially a defensive system?
Yeah, no, I'd be pleased to address that issue because it's just not true. We have not cut the sale in half. I don't know where the hell that story came from, but we get used to those stories appearing every now and then in the press. But I want to assure you that we're committed to a full sale of the Javelin to India, and we are working very closely with India, not only on that sale, but on other sales as well, to try to improve their capabilities. So I want you to know that, I recognize, as I said in my statement, that as we provide these new technologies, that oftentimes we run into the barriers of various laws that have been passed either by our Congress or your Congress, and that sometimes provide bureaucratic barriers to trying to complete these sales. What my goal is in appointing my deputy secretary to oversee this effort is to try to develop a broader strategy if we can. What is it that India needs? What is it that we can be helpful on? And therefore be more effective at trying to reduce the barriers and improve the efficiency in those sales. So that's the approach that I'm hoping to take. And I think it will benefit not only your country, but our country as well.
Thank you, Secretary Panetta. I am a graduate of Fort Leavenworth of the bicentennial era. And thank you for those very kind words and for words that encourage strengthening of India-US defense relationship. You've spoken extensively about Asia Pacific, and during your presentation you mentioned about your conversations with our leadership on Afghanistan. I want to ask you a question about Afghanistan. Firstly, what is the US title, the new appellation about Afghanistan good enough as a policy? Because we are not clear what that means. Secondly, I do believe that the United States, as part of this defense cooperation, may seek more intensive Indian efforts inside Afghanistan on what India can do on security cooperation with the Afghan National Security Forces or in other areas. Did you, in your conversations with the Ministry of Defense, or rather the Defense Minister or the National Security Advisor, make any specific requests other than what is in the ambit of the India-Afghanistan strategic partnership that you would like the Indians to do in Afghanistan for a post-2014 scenario? Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you very much for the question. My goal, the United States goal in Afghanistan, is to complete the mission. This isn't about good enough. This is about completing the mission. And what the mission is to have an Afghanistan that can secure and govern itself. That's what our mission is about. So that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorism and for those that would attack not only our country but other countries as well. So the fundamental mission that we are embarked on is the mission of establishing an Afghanistan that can secure and govern itself, obviously be sovereign, be independent, but more importantly be stable in its ability to be able to proceed and join the family of nations in this region. That's our goal. We think we are on the way to accomplishing that mission. General Allen has laid out a plan for transition. I believe 2011 was a turning point in the Afghan war. We weakened the Taliban significantly. The levels of violence went down. They continue to be down, even though we are seeing efforts at trying to increase their attacks. The level of violence still remains down. We have seen an improvement in the operations of the Afghan army and police. There are roughly about 346,000 in the Afghan army. Our goal is to achieve a number of 352,000 and to be able to use the Afghan army in the transition process. We are also proceeding with the transition of key areas in Afghanistan to their control and to their governance. As we speak, 50% of the Afghan population has been transitioned into Afghan security and control. We announced, President Karzai announced a third tranche of areas to be completed hopefully by the end of the summer. When we do that, 75% of the Afghan population will be under their security and control. So we are proceeding on a very effective plan that General Allen has laid out and has now been endorsed by the 50 nations of ISAF, both NATO and our partners in Chicago, committed to that transition toward and drawdown towards the end of 2014. In addition, we've signed a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan that will have us maintaining an enduring presence in Afghanistan. We will continue beyond 2014. We'll continue working on counterterrorism. We'll continue to provide training and assistance to their forces, and we'll continue to provide support. That's a commitment that the President has made and that we have made clear we will maintain in Afghanistan. What I asked of the leaders here is that they continue to provide the training that they are providing now. My understanding is that the training takes place here in India for those that are brought here. What I urged is that they continue to do that, if possible, expand that training in order to improve the efficiency of the Afghan army. There was nothing said about doing anything in terms of additional military efforts in Afghanistan itself.
Thank you. Ms. Gurmeet, I'll come to you. Ms. Gurmeet Kabal. Ms. Gurmeet Kabal.
Brigadier Gurmeet Kabal. Thank you, Chair. My question also pertains to Afghanistan and what you just said, Secretary. Some of us, in fact many of us present here in this room today, do not share the optimism of NATO and ISAF forces about the ability of the Afghan National Security Forces to take over independent charge of security in Afghanistan after the departure of NATO and ISAF in 2014, so as to prevent the Taliban from taking over the country once again. Is there a plan B in place already? And what are your views on a regional peacekeeping and stabilization force, perhaps under a UN flag? Thank you.
You know, as always, when these things, when these efforts begin, there were questions raised about the capability of the Afghans to be able to develop an effective armed forces and an effective police force to maintain security. I should say the same questions were raised in Iraq, and large questions about whether or not they would be able to develop their capabilities. They did. The reason that we were able to withdraw from Iraq is because Iraq was able to secure and defend itself and govern itself. Are there going to be bumps in the road as a democracy? You bet. That's the nature of democracy. India goes through bumps in the road. The United States goes through bumps in the road. But the fact is that we have established a democracy, a governing system there in which they can defend and secure themselves. That's our mission. That's true in Afghanistan as well. And what I saw happening in 2011 was that the Afghan army has indeed developed the capability to engage with our forces in operations and to maintain stability in those areas that they're involved with in terms of securing. When the bombing attacks took place in Kabul, the army and the police were very effective at securing Kabul as a result of that. We've seen that happen now in the southern part of Afghanistan. We've seen it happen in the other areas that we've transitioned. The Afghan army is taking control, and they are taking the battle to the enemy. That's the important point. So we don't have a plan B because we don't think we need a plan B. This is about plan A, which is to give the Afghans the capability to govern and secure themselves. And so our goal will be to continue to train and support and assist the Afghan army so that they will be a permanent force that can protect that country in the future. And the fact that we will be there past 2014 is additional insurance to assure that they continue to train and develop as they must in order to maintain a stable Afghanistan. I honestly believe that they are developing the capabilities they need in order to do the job.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Sir, I have two questions. Every time you have a drone attack in Pakistan or where they killed Osama, the Pakistanis come to you charging with violating their sovereignty. How do you counter that? It's one of their terrorists or given sanctuary by them. Second, on the aircraft carriers, you've been quoted as saying that you will be stationing about 6 aircraft carriers, 6 or about 6, in Asia Pacific region, which actually means that your entire carrier force will be committed to India, the Asia Pacific region, because they do their duty, they have to go back for replenishment, and the others are towards this side. I think that would be quite tough. One, you have always been wanting some foothold in the Indian Ocean. I'm a journalist with India Strategic, and I'm also a member here. I remember in 1980, I had gone to Sri Lanka, and I heard that you were looking for a rest and recreation base there. I reported that, and of course, Mrs. Gandhi opposed it very strongly. Countries probably in the region would still oppose that, and also probably in the changed circumstances might. There is a report which I hear on one of the TV stations here that your Bangladesh will be offering you RR facilities or basing facilities. Can you just kindly elaborate how would you deploy, how long? Thank you.
Sure.
I may also mention that you deployed 3 aircraft carriers off Pakistan during Operation Osama, Geronimo. Did it threaten the Pakistanis in some way not to interfere with your operation at that time?
They didn't know about our operation. That was the whole idea. With regards to do the aircraft carriers first, we have 11 aircraft carriers in our fleet, and we will maintain 11 aircraft carriers. The carriers, when we say that 60% will move to the region, that means that some of them are going to be based on the Pacific. So they'll be ported. They're not all going to be floating around the Pacific. They're going to be in ports on the Pacific side, probably along the West Coast, as well as obviously Hawaii and the other bases in Japan that we currently use. So we're not looking for additional bases. Pardon me? That's correct. I mean, the ones we use now are going to suffice for the force that we need to maintain here. But we are moving them into the Pacific and porting them in the Pacific side so that if we need to deploy them, they'll be there for that purpose. With regards to the drones, again, without getting into operational details on that, look, this is about our sovereignty as well, because there were a group of individuals who attacked the United States on 9/11 and killed 3,000 of our citizens. And we went to war against those who attacked the United States of America. The leadership of those that were involved in planning this attack are located in Pakistan, in the Fatah. And we have made clear to the Pakistanis that the United States of America is going to defend ourselves against those that would attack us. And we have done just that. We have gone after their leadership, and we have done it effectively, targeting Al-Qaeda leadership and terrorists. And very frankly, the terrorists who threaten the United States threaten Pakistan as well. This is not just about protecting the United States. It's also about protecting Pakistan. And we have made very clear that we are going to continue to defend ourselves.
Sir, I work for Times Now, a TV channel. You spoke about the American planes that went down during World War II in Arunachal Pradesh. You brought this up with Prime Minister. Can you tell us exactly what you told the Prime Minister, what the reaction was? As far as another issue is concerned, you said that you will stand by India when you were speaking. What happens to these three agreements that you were looking at, SISMOA, BECA, and LSA? Did they come up during your discussions, and what was the Indian reaction? Also, did you mention the Haqqani issue to Mr. Antony today when you met him?
First of all, on the 400 pilots, the Prime Minister was very moving and in the discussion, because I think he understands how important it is to be able to do what we can to return the remains of those that we are able to find to their families. We have a pledge in the military that we leave nobody behind. And for that reason, we do try to seek the remains of those that were lost in combat. And I must say that India has been very cooperative in that effort, and we deeply appreciate their cooperation as we try to determine whether or not we can find those remains. With regards to, no, we did not discuss the agreements. I know that my predecessor had raised the issue of the agreements. Frankly, my view is that we can continue discussions in those areas, but I believe we have a strong relationship. We have good cooperation. I think we can continue to move towards the goals that I outlined in my speech, even though we might, we might not always agree with regards to the specific agreements that we're discussing. I don't see those as barriers to improving our relationship with India. The last point, I'm sorry, what was the last point? On the Haqqanis. Yes, I did discuss this with the Indian leadership. Look, Afghanistan, the effort to succeed in Afghanistan in many ways is dependent on our ability to eliminate the safe haven in Pakistan. You can't have a stable Afghanistan if you don't have a stable Pakistan that is dealing with the threats that come across the border. And the principal threat that we're confronting right now are the Haqqanis. The Haqqanis were involved in some recent attacks on our forces. And that concerned that we cannot allow those who simply come across the border, attack and kill people on our side of the border, attack our troops, and then escape back into a safe haven. And so we have urged, and we will continue to urge Pakistan to take steps to deal with that safe haven in order to prevent that from happening. The ability to achieve the kind of Afghanistan that we want, one that can secure and govern itself for the future, it is going to be in large measure dependent on a Pakistan that is able to confront terrorism within their own borders. That's an important issue that has to be confronted by Pakistan.
Just two quick questions. One is about I'm Seema Mustafa, a journalist here. Relations between the US and India, how are they going to impact on China, considering the kind of amazing relationship that you have spelled out? So do you think that that's going to have an adverse reaction? And secondly, on Pakistan and US relations militarily seem to have sort of dipped quite a bit over the last few weeks and months and years. So is that going to impact on your pullout from Afghanistan and your fight against terrorism in the region?
On the first point, I believe in the discussions that I've had here that I think both India and certainly the United States recognize that it is in our interest to develop a cooperative relationship with China. I'm in the process of trying to strengthen our military-to-military relationship with China. I met with Vice President Xi in Washington and then met with General Liang and discussed ways to try to improve our military-to-military relationship. I believe that that it is important that we have strong lines of communication and that we improve the transparency between our countries with regards to what we're seeking to achieve. I mean, I believe that it is in China's interest. It's in China's interest to be able to have a region that is secure and prosperous and peaceful. China faces the same threats that we all face in this region. They face the threat of terrorism. They face the threat of piracy. They face the threat of humanitarian and disaster needs that have to be met. They face the threat that if we don't have free trade in this region, it could impact on everyone's economies. The ability to use our sea lanes, the ability to protect maritime rights on our oceans are something that is extremely important to all nations in this region. And we also face the threat of, frankly, nuclear proliferation from an unstable North Korea. That's something that is as much a threat to China as it is to others in this region. And the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. All of these things are common threats. They're not just threats to the United States. They're not just threats to India. They're not just threats to other countries, Philippines, Indonesia. They're threats to all of the countries in this region. And it's for that reason that we all have to work together in developing a cooperative relationship, in developing the capabilities of these countries so that we can all confront these issues. so that we can all confront these issues. So my goal is to do what I can to improve our mill-to-mill relationship with China. I think India's goal is to try to improve that relationship as well with China. I think that's the healthy way to try to approach a better relationship between the powers in the Pacific. You asked one other thing.
US, Pakistan.
Yes. You know, just as India views the relationship with Pakistan as complicated, so do we. And it is. It's a complicated relationship. Oftentimes frustrating. Oftentimes difficult. But at the same time, it is a necessary relationship. India shares a border with Pakistan. It's important that you continue to try to make what progress you can in dealing with Pakistan, in trying to resolve your differences. The same thing is true for the United States. We are fighting a war in the FATA. We are fighting a war against terrorism. I think what I try to stress with the Pakistanis is that terrorism is just as much a threat to their country as it is to ours. They have lost many lives in their country as a result of terrorist attacks. They also happen to be a nuclear power. And it's extremely important that that we maintain the relationship with them. They have been cooperative oftentimes in the efforts that we've engaged with as far as what we've done in going after those that threaten our country. They have provided some cooperation. There are other times when, frankly, that cooperation is not there. But the United States cannot just walk away from that relationship. We have to continue to try to do what we can to try to improve what areas where we can find some mutual cooperation. We are now engaged in negotiations to try to see if we can open up the transit centers. It's an important area for us. We're engaging in negotiations with them to try to see if we can arrive at an agreement that would reopen those areas. We are going through the north right now. We have the Northern Transit Center. It obviously meets our needs. It's a little more expensive because we do have to go farther in terms of the routes that we're involved with. We would prefer, we don't prefer, we would like to have the additional transit centers through Pakistan as well. So we'll continue to negotiate on that. We'll continue to discuss with them the drone operations. We'll continue to discuss with them other forms of assistance. Our goal is to try to do what we can to try to improve the relationship with them. That is not easy, but it is necessary that we continue that effort.
General Murphy, one thing we are coming towards the conclusion, and I would like to have patience and understanding if your turn doesn't come before we conclude. General Murphy.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I would request your views on the timings which you have chosen to announce the change in your strategy, with more pivot and force being deployed in the Asia-Pacific region. Normally, this I'm sure it has been done because you visualize after 10-15 years a change in the strategic environment in the region. While you have propounded a philosophy that you are developing closer relationships with China and you hope to succeed, factually it doesn't appear to be so. Otherwise, why would you change the weight of your forces from the one side to the other? And secondly, do you visualize or foresee in the coming years a greater cooperation between Russia and China, becoming again one superpower or a pillar of the world polarization vis-a-vis America, so that you are able to take actions and face them in this region? Is that the reason, sir? Or is it because of any other reason? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Look, as I indicated, we are at a turning point after 10 years of war in the United States. It's been the longest continuous period that we've been at war. And what we now see is that, you know, we have brought the mission in Iraq to a conclusion. We are in the process of hopefully being able to transition in Afghanistan. We certainly have impacted on terrorism. We have significantly impacted the leadership of Al-Qaeda. We had a strike yesterday that that hit another deputy leader in Al-Qaeda. And as you know, we were successful at going after bin Laden. And we have impacted their ability to have command and control so that they cannot effectively put together a 9/11 type attack because of our efforts. We were successful in the NATO effort in Libya. So we are at a period where after 10 years of war, you know, hopefully we are able to turn a corner here. At the same time, we are facing budget constrictions in the United States. We are running a high deficit and a high debt in the United States. And the Congress, in what was called the Budget Control Act, passed a number in defense savings of roughly $487 billion over 10 years that I was asked to reduce the defense budget by. So faced with a turning point, faced with the need to find additional savings, but also facing a world in which there are continuing threats. We continue to face the threat of terrorism, not just in Pakistan, but in Yemen and Somalia and North Africa. We continue to face the instability of North Korea and the potential for some kind of conflict with that country. We face the same thing with Iran. We face turmoil in the Middle East. We're facing cyber attacks now, which have become a whole new arena, a whole new battlefield for the future. So, you put all of that together, we are continuing to face some major threats in the world. And so my view was, faced with that, it was important for the United States to sit back and develop a strategy for what our defense strategy ought to be, not just now, but into 2020 and beyond. And so that led us, myself, the service leaders at the Pentagon, the undersecretaries, the President of the United States, to sit down and develop the strategies that we felt were important in order to deal with the challenges we face in the future. It's made up of 5 elements. The rebalancing is one of those, but there are 5 elements. Let me just summarize those. 1, we know we are going to be a smaller force, we'll be a leaner force. But we have to be agile, we have to be deployable, we have to be flexible, and we have to be on the cutting edge of technology. That's 1. 2, we felt it was important to focus on the 2 areas that represent the biggest problems that we are going to confront in the future. One is the Pacific region, because of the threat from North Korea, because of other challenges that we think are going to be extremely important to our future prosperity and security. And secondly, the Middle East. Middle East continues to be an area that we have to maintain a focus on. So those two major refocuses. 3, we have to maintain a presence in the rest of the world as well. We can't just walk away from that. And so what we've developed is this innovative and I think very creative approach to rotational presence, where we can send forces in, do exercises, develop new partnerships, develop new alliances, work with the capabilities in those countries to develop their capabilities as well. We'll do that in Latin America, we'll do that in Africa, we'll do that in countries in this region, we'll do that in Europe. In addition to that, we felt it was very important to have enough power so that we could confront more than one enemy at a time. For example, if we have a war in Korea and we face a threat in the Straits of Hormuz, we have to have the ability to address both of those and to win. And we think we have protected a sufficient force to do that. And lastly, we thought it was important to invest, not just to cut back, but to invest in areas for the future. We need to invest in cyber. We need to invest in space. We need to invest in unmanned systems. We need to invest in special forces. And we need to invest in the capability to mobilize if we have to, if we are facing a crisis. All of those elements I just described are part of the strategy that we've developed for the 21st century.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm told we've completely run out of time, so I request forgiveness of those who were very anxious. I must thank you, sir, for very full and satisfying answers. In fact, it was like listening to a textbook lecture on defense strategy and management.